What if beauty isn't a celebration, but a surrender? Picture two strangers standing in silence before a painting. They don't know each other. They don't speak, but their eyes are locked, entranced by the same thing, a canvas that isn't moving, yet moves something deep within them. Time slips, breathing slows, and in that moment, they are no longer strangers. They are mirrors, not of each other, but of something deeper, something older, something hidden. The painting doesn't depict anything shocking. A simple landscape, perhaps, a storm curling over the ocean, or a woman staring just past the frame, as if she sees something you don't. But there's a weight in the air, a silence so thick it feels alive. This isn't about art. Not really. This is about the abyss it opens. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote that beauty, true beauty, has the power to obliterate the self, to annihilate the ego, however briefly. In the face of sublime beauty, he said, we stop wanting, we stop fearing, we stop being ourselves. And that, paradoxically, is why it's dangerous. Because when the self dissolves, something else rushes in to take its place. For Schopenhauer, this was a form of liberation, a temporary escape from the tyranny of desire, a break from the relentless craving machine of the human condition. But in the hands of others, this psychological vulnerability becomes a tool, a weapon, a way in. What happens when the obliteration of self is not a moment of freedom, but an opening for control? Consider the modern world. Advertising doesn't sell products. It sells identities. The right scent, the right car, the right logo. It doesn't just make you desirable. It erases your insecurity. It promises ego death, followed by rebirth, a better you, a more admired, more complete you. Politics do it too. A stirring speech, a well-framed symbol, a national myth. These are crafted not just to persuade, but to seduce, to pull you out of yourself, to blur the line between I and we, until you forget where one ends and the other begins. In moments of awe, whether from art or war or revolution, we don't just witness beauty, we surrender to it. And in that surrender lies both transcendence and peril. This is not a story about paintings or philosophers or even power. This is a story about mirrors and abysses, about how we stare into things we think we understand, only to discover they are staring back, silently reshaping us. So ask yourself, when you're moved by something, truly moved, what part of you is doing the moving? And what part of you has already disappeared? The greatest manipulations don't come in chains. They come in moments of clarity. They come in beauty. And that's where our story begins. He was born in Danzig in 1788, in a house that smelled of damp timber and unresolved quarrels. His father, Heinrich, traded in distant ports, yet carried a storm inside. His mother, Johanna, floated through salons, reciting verses that never reached her son. In that uneasy household, Arthur learned two lessons early. Money can buy distance, and distance can turn every heartbeat into an echo. When the family fled Prussia for Hamburg, the boy watched the city walls shrink behind a carriage window. Exile stamped its first impression on his soul. At 13, he begged to accompany his parents on a 2-year tour of Europe. A privilege, people said, yet Arthur kept a private ledger of misery. In the grand cathedrals of France and Italy, he counted candles and corpses. He saw beauty packaged as spectacle and felt the ground shift beneath him. The world, he realized, is architecture built on yearning, and yearning is only a polite word for suffering. He returned to Germany, speaking fluent despair. His father wanted a merchant, so Arthur apprenticed with ledgers and exchange rates. But the columns blurred into prison bars. At 17, he wrote in his diary that life is a debt no profit can repay. One icy March morning, Heinrich's body was found in the canal, an apparent suicide. Arthur never spoke of it without a flicker of guilt, as if his own bleakness had been contagious. The weight of an unasked question settled on his shoulders. If desire ends in water, what else is real? Johanna, widowed and restless, moved to Weimar and opened a literary salon glittering with poets and generals. She adored optimism. Her drawing room overflowed with it. Arthur, now a university student, visited on Sundays and punctured every polite allusion. He mocked the sentimental poems on the coffee table. He quoted Horace about the worms waiting beneath every laurel wreath. Mother and son became opposing magnets. Her laughter was applause. His was a verdict. She told him he was unfit for society. He told her society was a costume party for despairing animals. They parted for good after a final quarrel, so fierce she compared his presence to a black cloud that strangled conversation. At Göttingen, he devoured biology and Sanskrit with equal hunger, searching for the skeleton of existence. In Berlin, he attended Hegel's packed lectures and felt physically ill. Hegel, with his spirals of dialectic progress, sounded to Arthur like a bureaucrat praising a burning building for its architectural innovation. Schopenhauer called him a charlatan, then scheduled his own lectures at the exact same hour out of spite. Only a handful of students showed up. Resentment fermented into clarity. Truth will often starve in a marketplace of comforting lies. By 27, he unveiled his life's manifesto, the world as will and representation. He expected tremors. The public barely yawned. Publishers sent polite rejections. Colleagues offered colder silences. While Hegel was crowned the imperial philosopher of Prussia, Arthur rented a modest apartment and listened to the wallpaper peel. Isolation became laboratory. He paced creaking floors and argued with invisible crowds, sharpening every sentence like a blade for a duel that would never come. Yet even as he mapped the anatomy of suffering, he kept circling one paradox. Beauty, how could the same world that flays us also summon moments that stop the wound of time? He dissected Greek tragedies, Mozart sonatas, the curve of a marble torso. In those rare instants, he wrote, the will, the blind engine of craving, falls silent. Consciousness lifts its gaze above the treadmill of need, tasting a freedom so fragile it vanishes when named. His fascination with beauty was never detached scholarship. It was an emergency exit he could barely fit through. He had tried other doors. Lust, gambling, a notorious affair that ended with him pushing a seamstress who later miscarried and sued him for damages. The court ruled against him, branding his reputation with cruelty. For the rest of his life, he kept the legal transcript on his desk as a reminder. A man may master theory, yet remain hostage to appetite. Beauty, by contrast, demanded surrender without aftermath. It anesthetized desire instead of feeding it. In old age, he finally tasted vindication. Revolutions toppled thrones, and Europe's faith in steady progress collapsed under artillery smoke. Readers who had once ignored him now copied his bleak aphorisms into private journals. When asked how it felt to be celebrated, he shrugged. Fame is a lone shark's call in the night, but a quieter triumph flickered in his eyes, proof that a solitary voice, tuned to suffering, can outlast the choirs of comfortable belief. Inside that victory hid a warning. Schopenhauer's life shows that philosophy is not a lighthouse built above the storm. It is a flare fired from within it. Every principle he etched onto paper was first carved into bleeding experience. His contempt for optimism, his diagnosis of the will, his reverence for aesthetic surrender, they were not abstract speculations. They were fingerprints on the bars of a cell built from childhood grief, parental ghosts, and unquiet passions. When we read him, we meet a man flayed raw and forced to make meaning from exposed nerve, and we inherit his question like a haunting. If beauty can silence the will, who shall wield that silence? Artist or manipulator? Liberation or leash? The answer depends on who Schopenhauer insisted that our most trusted companion, conscious perception, tells only half the story. What we call reality is a theater of representations, images woven together by the mind to keep chaos at a polite distance. Colors, sounds, textures, even the rhythm of time itself. Each is a curated translation, not the original script. We walk through life as honored guests at an exhibition, forgetting that every gallery wall hides a machinery of pulleys and trapdoors. Representation is orderly, intelligible, and seductively humane. It allows us to speak of goals, morals, and meaning without trembling at the void behind them. Behind the velvet curtain rages the other half, the will. Here there are no colors, no melodies, no geometries, only drive. Blind, voracious, unceasing, the will is the hunger that births planets, splits cells, and drags breathing creatures toward mating calls they barely understand. It is the engine that keeps hearts beating long after hope has left the room. The reason green shoots crack asphalt, the pressure that wakes you at 3 a.m., listing what you still lack. For Schopenhauer, the will is not inside you. You are inside it, a fleeting eddy in its relentless surge. Most philosophies place consciousness at the summit, a crown upon the edifice of nature. Schopenhauer flips the structure upside down. Conscious thought is a late, fragile bloom. The will is the root that feeds it, ignores it, and will outlive it. The moment you identify a desire, fame, affection, tomorrow's breakfast, the curtain briefly parts, and the will stares through your eyes. Fulfillment offers only a pause, never a conclusion. The will merely reroutes its current toward the next craving. Existence becomes a pendulum swinging between wanting and boredom, each state equally restless. Enter beauty. For Kant, aesthetic pleasure is disinterested. We savor form without needing to possess it. A sunset, a fugue, the arc of a marble statue. These draw admiration freed from appetite. Yet Kant's optimism still presumes that judgment rests with a rational spectator. Schopenhauer watches the same sunset and senses something darker pulsing beneath the pastel sky. Beauty, he argues, is the moment the will contemplates its own reflection without immediately lunging at it. The predator pauses, mesmerized by a pool of still water, forgetting for an instant that it hunts. That pause feels like liberation when a symphony lifts the heart or a mountain vista dissolves anxiety. The self seems to vanish into pure, effortless clarity. Schopenhauer calls this aesthetic contemplation, the intellect turned outward with no agenda, observing instead of grasping. The will, temporarily quieted, allows consciousness to hover above the wheel of craving, like a dragonfly above a whirlpool. The sensation is so exquisite that mystics proclaim enlightenment upon it. Artists devote lifetimes to recapturing it, and audiences empty wallets for 2-hour vacations from themselves. Yet Schopenhauer refuses to let the spell stand unchallenged. The trance is real, but it is not escape. It is the will's subtlest strategy. By offering the mind a fleeting holiday from turmoil, beauty renews our capacity to endure more turmoil. The audience leaves the concert hall feeling purified, then returns to hungers waiting in the streetlight. The sublime feeds the same engine it momentarily stalls. A well-designed advertisement hijacks this mechanism. The product becomes an object of aesthetic awe, promising serenity while stoking deeper need. The will knows that a briefly anesthetized victim is easier to guide than one in open revolt. Contrast this with Kant's moral faith that reason can govern passion. Schopenhauer finds that confidence naive. Reason, he says, is a lantern carried by the will to better navigate the darkness. It illuminates just enough for desire to plot its next advancement. Beauty only shifts the tempo. Instead of roaring, the will sings. Instead of grabbing, it invites. But the hand behind the gesture remains the same. Understanding this dynamic is crucial, not merely for philosophy majors, but for anyone scrolling endless feeds designed to mesmerize. Each curated image, each looping reel, is a miniature aesthetic moment engineered to hush resistance and slip a fresh longing into the bloodstream. What, then, is left for freedom? Schopenhauer offers no cheerful emancipation, yet he hints at an austere form of clarity. When we recognize representation as a veil and beauty as the veil's silken edge, we gain the power of refusal, not the refusal of ascetics who shun all pleasure, but a subtler defiance, the capacity to witness enchantment without mistaking it for release. To say, I see the sunset, I feel the hush, and I know the engine hums beneath. That knowledge cannot silence the will, but it can prevent us from confusing anesthesia with cure. Here, the metaphysics touches everyday life, like a match to dry grass. If the will manipulates through both pain and beauty, then the most persuasive systems, advertising, nationalism, celebrity culture will cloak their compulsions in aesthetic delight. Luxury branding seduces with minimalist elegance. Mass movements choreograph banners and chants into living mosaics. Even personal ambition packages itself as the art of living your best life. Recognizing the pattern does not dissolve it, but it places a lens between eye and spectacle. The lens does not remove color. It reveals the projector hidden behind the screen. And awareness, though fragile, is the first tool we wield against machinery too ancient to dismantle outright. Schopenhauer's metaphysics therefore stands not as gloomy abstraction, but as a forensic map of every moment desire disguises itself as beauty. Representation is the world we can narrate. The will is the narrator we cannot dismiss. Beauty is their clandestine conference room. To attend that meeting with open eyes is to stand at the crossroads of illusion and insight, hearing both the siren song and the gears that grind beneath it. Whether we walk away spellbound or sober, we'll decide which stories continue to write us and which we finally begin to write ourselves. And behind the curtain, whispering the next scene. Beauty is not merely observed, it is inhaled. It seeps through the eyes and saturates the bloodstream before reason can object. Symmetry, gloss, a sudden burst of color, each acts like a passcode to the oldest vaults of the nervous system. Neurons ignite, the nucleus accumbens, pumps dopamine, and one command rises: stay. That reflex predates language, echoing a billion ancestral choices that paired perception with survival. Modern scanners confirm the instinct. Show volunteers a panel of faces, and the fusiform area fires in proportion to symmetry. Tilt a cheekbone a few millimeters, and excitement drops. Symmetry once signaled genetic health. Software filters now imitate it, yet the brain salutes the mimic. Evolution rarely updates firmware. Advertisers know and exploit the lag. Novelty joins symmetry as co-conspirator. The orienting response yanks attention toward anything unexpected. A neon sneaker, a headline whispering secret truths. Surprise once warned of predators. Now, it lures us down algorithmic rabbit holes. Each unpredictable cut in a music video, each randomized reward in a game, drips dopamine into expectation. Color is another subtle agent. Crimson berries guided foragers to calories. Deep greens hinted at water. Today, icons glow red to override deliberation. Open, check, refresh. Casinos drape machines in jewel tones, replicating feast signals. Every lever couples novelty, color, and the maybe of riches. Motion intensifies the spell. Static images already corner attention, but fluid motion activates circuitry built to track prey and partner. Swipe-driven apps exploit that channel. Each thumb flick produces a mini-film. Card slides away. Reward uncertainty spikes. The intermittent reinforcement schedule, discovered by B.F. Skinner, remains the most efficient path to compulsion. All these cues converge in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the seat of subjective value. When it fires, critical faculties dim. fMRI studies show reduced activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the region of deliberation. When subjects view aesthetically charged stimuli, This is the neurological handshake Schopenhauer sensed. Beauty hushes intellect, so the will may proceed unchallenged. Take romantic obsession. Early-stage lovers display cortisol and dopamine patterns, overlapping those in substance abuse. The beloved's face overrides hunger and duty. Shakespeare called love a smoke made with the fume of sighs. Neuroscience adds that the smoke is aerosolized dopamine. Gambling shows the darker edge. Near misses, 2 cherries, and a bar activate reward circuits almost as strongly as wins. The brain, drunk on possibility, ignores math. Pair near-miss dopamine with flashing icons and you have a trance machine calibrated to empty pockets, while donors beg for another round. Social media copies the casino at planetary scale. Each scroll is a digital lever. Perhaps the next post delivers beauty, affirmation, outrage, any novelty to jolt the midbrain. Algorithms study pupil dilation and heartbeat, then refine the bait. Users think they sample reality. Reality has been sculpted into an intravenous drip. Kent Berridge names the result wanting without liking. Dopamine fuels pursuit, not contentment. The selfie that gains 200 likes soothes for minutes, then enlarges the void it filled. The will renews its contract and raises the stakes. More filters, tighter waistlines, brighter backdrops, grounded in data. Schopenhauer's insight feels less poetic, more diagnostic. The same circuitry that once secured survival now secures market share and political allegiance. The optic nerve cannot distinguish between danger cues and branding cues, so the will colonizes both. Agency erodes as agency's instruments are repurposed, yet awareness forces a crack in the glass. Naming the circuitry reactivates the cortex, restores the pause between impulse and action. Beauty will still shimmer, dopamine will still flow, but the spell loses inevitability. The question shifts from how to end desire to how to refuse its blind commands. In that narrow margin, Schopenhauer's warning becomes an invitation. See the enchantment, trace the wires, and decide whether to follow the music or step. Finally, outside the hall, music provides another route into the command center. A perfect cadence resolves tension. Oxytocin rises, skin tingles, and McGill researchers. Record dopamine bursts on par with nicotine intake. The listener feels lifted beyond self. Yet chemicals are simply rewarding, a prediction confirmed by pattern. Enchantment masquerades as transcendence. Video editors mimic that cadence in seconds. Quick cut tension, followed by a slow motion, reveal spikes, pupil dilation, and heart rate. Metrics tracked in modern trailer labs before the clip is released. The gasp pays the bills. These levers do not require conspiracy. Infants, 2 days old, prefer faces. Adults deem attractive. Proof that the switchboard is wired at birth, awaiting any hand that finds the buttons. Trouble enters when engineered abundance overwhelms Stone Age breaks. A berry bush offered seasonal sugar. A smartphone offers infinite bursts, 24 hours, tuned by teams vying for milliseconds of fixation. The will scales. Willpower does not. Recognizing the circuitry reframes failure. Compulsive scrolling and shopping binges are not moral collapses, but predictable outcomes of reward loops running on outdated biology. Understanding the trap sets the stage for the next question. Who builds it, and to what end? From the moment humanity began to tell stories, beauty has not merely been admired, it has been feared. It does not ask for attention. It commands it, not through force, but by awakening something deep in the psyche. A pull, a silence, a surrender. The ancient Greeks understood this instinctively. Their myths were not just tales. They were coded warnings about the forces that govern us. Among the most haunting are the sirens, creatures of terrifying allure. They did not chase their victims. They waited. Their weapon was not claws or teeth, but song, sweet, seductive, irresistible. Sailors, hardened by salt and storm, would hear that song and forget who they were. They'd turn the wheel toward the rocks. Their ships would shatter, and they would drown smiling. The sirens were never about monsters at sea. They were a mirror, a symbol of the moments when logic collapses under desire, when reason becomes irrelevant, when the self dissolves into the spell of something beautiful. The Greeks weren't warning against women. They were warning against the parts of ourselves that long to be destroyed by enchantment. Centuries later, the face of Helen of Troy became the emblem of that same phenomenon, the face that launched 1,000 ships. But what does that really mean? It means men abandoned homes, kingdoms, alliances, and lives in pursuit of an image, an ideal. Helen was not just a woman, she was mythic beauty incarnate, a symbol of the irrational potency of aesthetic desire. Kings raised empires to chase it. Friends became enemies. Entire generations were lost. And yet, no one blamed Helen. No one could, because she wasn't the villain. She was the spell. Move forward to the age of knights and courts, and we meet courtly love, the medieval cult of adoration, where noblemen pined for unattainable women, weaving poetry and songs around their names. These were not marriages. They were obsessions. Women placed on pedestals so high that the pain of longing became a virtue. A knight might pledge his sword, his soul, his salvation, without ever expecting fulfillment. In that era, beauty became a moral compass, a divine flame. But again, it was untouchable, and that's the secret. What is most powerful about beauty is not possession, it's distance. In the golden haze of the Belle Époque, the beautiful era, Europe bathed in aesthetic intoxication. Art Nouveau, flowing and sensual, covered buildings like vines. Cabarets shimmered with performers whose glamour blurred the line between human and divine. Women like Mata Hari didn't just seduce men, they seduced nations. Paris, Vienna, Berlin. Each city became a canvas of desire, decadence, and delusion. Beauty wasn't just entertainment, it was power. It set the terms of cultural memory. The memory of this era isn't built from battles or treaties, but from images, faces, fashions, melodies, a civilization in love with its own mirror. But this obsession was not only Western. In the East, too, beauty was sanctified. The Hindu myth of Radha and Krishna is not just a love story, it's a metaphysical truth. Radha's longing for Krishna is seen as the soul yearning for the divine. Her devotion, her pain, her surrender, all are forms of transcendence. But Krishna, ever elusive, is not bound by her. The closer she gets, the farther he dances away. And yet she keeps following. In this dance, beauty becomes both path and obstacle to enlightenment. These myths and moments are not just history, they are fingerprints on the psyche. They reveal a timeless truth, that beauty has always been a kind of madness, a spell cast without consent. It does not need logic to justify itself. It bypasses thought and speaks directly to something older, something primal. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that beauty stuns us because it momentarily suspends the will, the constant striving, hungering, and needing that defines human life. In those moments, we do not want anything. We only behold, and that is dangerous, because in a world driven by control, productivity, and power, to simply behold is a kind of rebellion, a surrender, a pause in the machinery. But societies have always known this, and so they have both exalted and feared beauty. They have built altars and burned witches, crowned queens and locked women in towers, because when you realize how fragile reason is in the face of beauty, you understand just how precarious civilization truly is. What if the sirens were not monsters, but metaphors for the truths we cannot unsee? What if Helen's face launched ships not because of war, but because it proved that the soul could be hijacked by an image? What if we are not modern at all, but still circling the same flame, just with better lighting and stronger sails? Beauty, in all its forms, is not neutral. It shapes the decisions of kings, the movements of cultures, the desires of nations. It can end wars or start them. It can free the self or annihilate it, and still, we chase it, knowing full well that the rocks are waiting. We think of beauty as harmless, a sunset, a sculpture, a face. Beautiful things seem benign, but beauty is not neutral. It is not passive. In the hands of power, beauty becomes a weapon. It begins with attention. Aesthetics hijack the mind before the intellect has time to resist. Our brains are wired to prioritize the beautiful, symmetry, color, rhythm. Long before we understand, we are already entranced. And where attention goes, emotion follows. Where emotion flows, decisions are made. In this way, beauty becomes leverage, and those who understand this can engineer obedience, desire, even belief. In the 20th century, the machinery of mass persuasion discovered this truth with devastating precision. Take the films of Leni Riefenstahl, artful, mesmerizing, dangerous. Her work for Nazi Germany wasn't merely propaganda. It was an aesthetic architecture for a new mythology. The way Hitler was filmed, always from below, larger than life, framed against skies and crowds, wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, crafted to elevate a man into a messiah. These were not just films. They were visual spells. Schopenhauer once said, "The intellect is powerless against the will, and beauty, when harnessed by power, bypasses intellect entirely. The will is stirred, rationality becomes an afterthought." Propaganda, posters from Soviet Russia to 1940s America did the same. Idealized workers, heroic soldiers, utopian visions, all painted in glowing light, clean lines, bold contrasts. These images were beautiful by design. They didn't ask for your opinion. They bypassed it. They showed you a world you wanted to believe in. And that was enough. Fast forward. The regimes change. The ideologies shift. But the weapon remains the same. Now, it's not totalitarian states that deploy aesthetics. It's corporations, tech giants, influencers, and perhaps most dangerously, ourselves. Look at advertising. Beauty is no longer art. It is a science. Algorithms now determine which colors make you trust a brand, which angles make a face go viral, which font makes you feel safe. From the color of a soda can to the soft lighting in a fast food ad, nothing is arbitrary. We live in a civilization where entire industries are built on the manipulation of aesthetic perception. It's not about truth. It's about emotional velocity. Think of perfume commercials. Abstract, slow motion, ethereal. They don't sell scent. They sell fantasy, an aesthetic hallucination, one designed to infect your unconscious. Social media has taken this further. Personalized propaganda, delivered not from a regime, but from your friends. Filters smooth the skin, enlarge the eyes, narrow the jaw. You're not just looking at a person. You're looking at a curated projection, shaped to evoke envy, lust, admiration. And in this world, beauty isn't something you witness. It's something you chase. It's something you perform. And in that performance, a terrifying shift happens. Your self-image becomes a product. Your identity, a brand. Aesthetic success becomes social currency. And like all currencies, it's manipulable. This isn't just about Photoshop or Facetune. This is about the psychological architecture of the attention economy. You are shown the world not as it is, but as it performs. And the performances that rise are the ones that stimulate your lizard brain. The shiny, the symmetrical, the seductive. The algorithm doesn't care about truth. It cares about retention. And beauty, whether in the form of a bikini selfie or a tear-jerking charity reel, buys your time. Your time buys their data. Their data shapes your future. Here's the sinister part. The more beautiful the illusion, the less likely we are to question it, because we want to believe. We want the story, the gloss, the highlight reel. The pain of reality, its noise, its asymmetry, is too much. So we scroll and we surrender, not to truth, but to aesthetics engineered to mimic truth. What used to be the realm of artists and visionaries is now the domain of market analysts and machine learning. We no longer design beauty. We optimize it. We test it, tweak it, A/B test it again. Beauty is now performance data. It is tested not for meaning, but for click-through rates, for conversion metrics. The result? A culture of aesthetic addiction, where reality feels bland and fiction feels divine, where the polished becomes preferable to the authentic, where we no longer ask what something means. We ask how well it performs. Schopenhauer warned us that beauty was not just a distraction, it was a strategy. And today, that strategy has reached its zenith. We live in a world where perception is currency, and the aesthetic is a battlefield. You are not just being entertained, you are being shaped. Every filter you scroll past, every cinematic vlog you envy, every perfectly posed ad you ignore, but still internalize. These are weapons, not in the sense of violence, but in the sense of influence, subtle, surgical, invisible, and unless you learn to see the strings behind the spectacle, you will dance to a tune you never chose. This is not a call to cynicism. It's a call to consciousness, to see beauty not as an enemy, but as a signal that something or someone is vying for your will. And once you recognize that, once you become fluent in the language of aesthetics, then you are no longer the target. You are the observer. And in this age, that shift from being manipulated to becoming aware is not just empowering, it's revolutionary. If beauty is a trap, then what does freedom look like? We live in a world saturated with aesthetic signals, engineered, optimized, commodified, but beauty wasn't always weaponized. Before it was curated, monetized, and sold back to us in pixels, beauty was a doorway, not into envy or desire, but into awareness. Schopenhauer believed in the power of beauty, but not as indulgence. For him, beauty was a rare portal out of the tyranny of the will, the endless craving, striving, consuming cycle that drives human suffering. He saw great art, sublime nature, and especially music as the few moments where the will is silenced, where the self dissolves, where we simply perceive. Think of it, standing before a vast mountain range, sitting in silence as a symphony builds to its crescendo, watching waves crash endlessly on a lonely beach. These are not just peaceful experiences, they are profound. Time slows, thought softens. You forget what you wanted, what you feared. For a moment, you are free. This is Schopenhauer's first escape route. Aesthetic contemplation, not consuming beauty, but beholding it. A state of pure perception, detached from ego. It's subtle, rare, easily drowned in noise, but it's real. The second path he offers is more radical. Asceticism. To minimize desire is to minimize the hold the world has on you. The monk, the minimalist, the one who steps outside the game. This isn't about self-denial for the sake of suffering. It's about clarity. When you stop chasing illusions, you stop being manipulated by them. You become still enough to see. But Schopenhauer's solution is not the only one. Nietzsche looks at the same world, the same chaos, illusion, performance, and laughs at the idea of withdrawal. Where Schopenhauer sees peace in renunciation, Nietzsche sees weakness. For Nietzsche, desire is not the enemy, it is the engine, the will to power, to create, to overcome. He doesn't reject the aesthetic world. He wants to shape it, dominate it, dance with it, not as a slave, but as an artist. And then there is Simone de Beauvoir. She doesn't retreat from life, nor does she glorify domination. She introduces ambiguity. She reminds us that we are caught between freedom and limitation, transcendence and fact. Her ethics are not about escape. They are about engagement, a conscious, critical encounter with beauty, one that refuses to be seduced, but also refuses to look away. And perhaps no tradition has explored the trap of illusion more deeply than Buddhism. At the heart of Buddhist philosophy is Maya, the world of appearances, ever shifting, never fully real. But the goal is not rejection. It is mindfulness, to see the illusion and in seeing, be liberated from it. Beauty, then, is not to be feared, but observed without attachment, experienced without identification. So where does that leave us? The truth is, there may be no full escape, not in the absolute sense. We are embedded in culture, in body, in history, but perhaps there are soft escapes, quiet exits, subtle shifts. We can consume beauty with awareness rather than hunger. We can notice the filter, the frame, the agenda, and choose how deeply we participate. We can use beauty not as a mask, but as a mirror. What do we crave when we scroll? What do we envy when we compare? These are not just distractions. They are signals, pointers to the parts of ourselves still asleep. We can seek art that disrupts rather than soothes, conversations that challenge rather than flatter, environments that invite slowness, not stimulation. We can take walks without earbuds, sit with music that demands stillness, read not to escape, but to remember. Most of all, we can learn to witness beauty as it is, rather than what it sells. A moment of shadow and light on a wall, the quiet dignity of aging skin, the asymmetry in a broken object, not beauty as perfection, but beauty as presence, raw, honest, alive. In a world addicted to performance, presence is revolutionary. The velvet trap is soft because it feels good. It flatters, seduces, entertains. But the escape is not about denial. It's about depth, about reclaiming your perception, seeing through the surface without needing to destroy it, because beauty isn't the enemy, illusion is. And when you can hold beauty without craving it, witness it without worshiping it, see it without losing yourself, you've stepped outside the trap, not to abandon the world, but to finally see it clearly. The painting is still there, same brushstrokes, same colors, same quiet allure, but something has changed. Not the art, but the eyes that behold it. What once seemed simply beautiful now feels layered, loaded. There's weight behind the light, intention behind the elegance. You don't just see the image, you see its effect. You see the pull, the seduction, the spell. This is the strange power that comes from awareness. Not the power to destroy illusion, but the power to recognize it, to name it, to watch it arise without being captured by it. The moment you understand that beauty can be a trap is the moment it loses some of its grip. It's not about rejecting beauty. That would be its own kind of blindness. It's about decoding it, reading it like a language, understanding who built it, who benefits from it, and what it wants from you. Because beauty always wants something: your attention, your loyalty, your obedience, or maybe just your silence. Think of the world we move through now. Neon reflections on glass, glossy smiles on billboards, carefully filtered faces on glowing screens. We don't just live among images, we breathe them. They shape how we feel, what we desire, what we believe. We scroll past suffering, packaged in cinematic tragedy, protest movements wrapped in powerful visuals, tragedy aestheticized until it becomes tolerable, war zones framed like fashion spreads. Even despair is curated, even pain is stylized. It's all velvet now, and yet This isn't a hopeless truth. It's a liberating one. Because when you realize that beauty is not just a mirror of the world, but a mask worn by the world, you gain something rare: discernment, the ability to pause, to ask, what am I really seeing? What is this image asking of me? Who is speaking through this form? In that space, something opens, a crack in the trance, and through that crack, freedom breathes. The world hasn't changed, but how you see it has. So the next time beauty calls to you, whether it's a product, a person, a story, a screen, pay attention to what stirs inside you. Is it clarity or craving? Is it truth or seduction? Not every beautiful thing is false, but every beautiful thing is powerful. And power must be seen before it can be navigated. This is the final lesson. The painting never changed, but the eyes did. And now, when the next beautiful thing beckons, will you fall into it or wake up instead?